be utilized from where it is collected. Legislators made a justification that always and always the money remitted back to local governments is inadequate and cannot sustainably make service in terms of delivery and meet the planned priorities at local government level. Now we need to understand this particular issue, and again we need to turn to experts, and our expert this evening is Mapinduzi. He is the legislator representing Guru West, and he has a vast experience in managing local governments. He has been the district leader for Guru district, one of those districts under his leadership that scooped awards for performing well at that level of local governments. And Honorable Ojala Mapinduzi, you are live on Soul TV, and we want to start from there. Tell us what you think this decision means when all the revenues that will be collected will remain at local government level.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, my brother, for giving me this opportunity. But let me also say thank you for to the viewers. Just to give a quick background, I think it's important to understand that local governments are mandated legally to plan, budget, generate local revenue, and implement their plans. And that has been the practice. And the purpose for which decentralization was put in place was to empower the citizens to be involved in decision making, but also in doing the things that is meant for them. And so decentralization empowered citizens to take part, to have ownership, to have participation at different levels. And so local governments have been doing that through the processes of planning, identifying what is needed for the people, planning for it, coming up with a budget, but also working on a plan and generating revenue on how such activities can be executed. The challenge has been that when government then decided that local revenue be sent to the consolidated fund, that created a lot of impact on the level of performances at local government level. Initially, local government would get whatever local revenue, but spend it in line with their work plan, in line with their budget lines. But government then decided that every money is collected should be sent to the consolidated fund. Now, the challenge is that restrictions are created, and then local government do not have the capacity or the mandate to determine what they want, and there are a lot of micromanagement, and resources have to go to the center. And then when you want to spend that money, you need to get cash limits from the Minister of Finance, you need to get cash warrants, and so there are a lot of restrictions that were created. And so local government started failing, and every time the processes became so long, to the extent that local government failed to implement timely. And as a result, when the financial year ends, when you have not implemented fully your programs, then the monies have to go back to the treasury. And so we decided as Parliament that, look, if we want to empower local government to function effectively, if we want to see an improvement in terms of service delivery, then we need to empower the local governments so they are able to take decisions, they are able to determine what they want to do with their money, and they are able to have that money on a timely basis so they can execute their plans well. And so the decision Parliament took, I think, is in the best interest of seeing an improvement in terms of service delivery, but also in terms of empowering local governments so they can do what they have to do without having excuses and all that. But I also think the Ministry of Finance already has so much work. And much as the decision to have all the money sent to the consolidated fund would be in the spirit of creating financial discipline, would be in the spirit of making sure that the aspect of accountability and planning is guaranteed, I think the level of micromanagement and the speed at which processes are taken have again impacted negatively. And so the decision Parliament took is to help local government execute their mandates, but also perform effectively. And I think that should be the direction we have to take.
Okay, Honorable, let's talk about the negative implications this decision may cause. For instance, let's look at the disparities in the collections, revenue collections among districts. For instance, I imagine that a district like an urban local government may collect much money when actually we may have another local government which actually collects little money. Won't that again be reflected in service delivery and in national development? Won't it be a challenge?
Well, I think those are two things. You are talking about two things, and we need to understand those two things correctly. Number one, I think issues to do with the capacity of local government entities to generate local revenue is one thing, but also the aspect of how whatever money they have collected is utilized is another thing. Local governments have well laid out plans. They have their budgets, they have to implement their work plan, and they have to make sure they provide services to the citizens. That is their mandate. Whether they have got little money or they have got so much money, they should be allowed to execute their mandate without any interference. And if we try to help so they are more effective, we should do it not in a way that will cripple or in a way that will affect the operation. We should instead be able to support local governments so they can perform effectively. But I think that part of the law, demanding that local revenue be collected and sent to the consolidated fund, however good, however well-intentioned the law is, I think the impact has been a lot more negative on the local governments, and that explains the decision we have taken. Because to us as Parliament, it's about how effective service delivery is being executed at local government level. How do the citizens have timely access to services, and how do we facilitate that process? So that is one thing. But then the other thing you have talked about is the aspect of many local government not having the financial marshals they need. And I think that should be looked at from a different direction. I think the biggest question here should be, what is government going to do? What should Parliament do to empower local governments to begin to generate a lot more? What should we do so local governments can creatively begin to generate income? What should we do so that local governments that do not have enough local revenue basis can be supported so they are able to have a lot more? That's a different story. So it has nothing to do with taking money to the consolidated fund, because whether a local government is generating 20 million or 100 million or 1 billion, all are expected to take this money to the consolidated fund, and the process of getting back that money to meet the service delivery demand is quite challenging, and we don't want those bureaucracies and the kind of difficulties they experience. But also the other thing why Parliament took the right decision is that, what if you generate local revenue and you have got your plans that you have to execute, but then because of the procedures and the laws you are failing to even access the little money you have got? That's where the problem is. I'll give you the example of Gulu City. As I speak right now, Gulu City, because of that law, Gulu City cannot right now execute any of their activities because their approved local revenue is just 400 million And within 2 months, the city was able to generate 800 million just in 2 months, not even a quarter. And because they generated above, these processes does not allow them to even spend what they have generated above. And if they want to spend it, they are even not allowed to have a supplementary budget. The process of getting a supplementary budget has to go through Ministry of Finance to Parliament. So why should Parliament has to approve a supplementary budget for a local government that is fully mandated to take charge of their budget and work plan and all that? I think that's the long line we are trying to cut, so we don't create unnecessary bureaucracy and micromanagement that is not fair to local government. So I think what you raise is very critical. The next level of debate that we need to bring in Parliament is the question of what do we do when a local government fails to generate local revenue? How can we support such a local government so they begin to generate? It's not about sending so much money. It is not about building a culture of dependency. I think it's about understanding the challenges that local governments are currently faced with and helping them to find ways so they are able to generate local revenue. So those are two things, and we should not mix them.
We talked about the effectiveness of local governments utilizing the available revenues, and that has been a problem with all MDAs. Actually, at the end of the financial year, they return the money to the treasury, the funds to the treasury, when actually there is work to be done at the grassroots. I'm talking about, Honorable, I'm talking about absorption capacity of MDAs. Won't it be the same challenge with these local governments if they collect much more revenue and they again fail to utilize those funds?
Well, again, that is very interesting, and actually thank you for bringing that angle. I think before we begin to say local governments are incompetent, before we begin to say local governments are not doing what they are supposed to do, before we begin to blame them for having money returned to the treasury, I think we should be able to ask ourselves very difficult questions, and we should be honest. How do we expect a local government entity to perform effectively when their staffing level is at below 50%? How do you expect a local government entity to effectively deliver services when they have about 25, 20, 27 or 30% of the staffing level that they should be having? And that explains the kind of, you look at one local government and the other. One local government may be performing so well and the other one performing so poorly, and when you go deeper to understand, you realize the other one performing well probably is an old district with a much higher staffing level, with a much bigger local revenue base. And so we should be able to handle this case by case. I think it would not be fair for us to use a blanket statement to judge local government. But also the other thing I want to tell you is that it's also about the timeliness, the manner in which government send releases to local government. The financial year starts on the 1st of every July and ends on the 30th of June. And so it's about managing the processes so that, and we should be able to ask government, and especially the Minister of Finance, as long as government send releases late to local government, they will not be able to do things timely. As long as local government take procurement procedures, slowly, without being mindful of the time frame, that causes problem. And so government has a duty to make sure monies, releases are sent timely, to make sure the long process, these bureaucratic processes are handled, so local governments do not have difficulties in doing what they're supposed to do. And also we need to help in building the capacity of local governments. All right? It's important, because the moment we keep on thinking that local governments are failing and therefore we should come with difficult laws, and it should not be a matter of coming up with laws. It should be about understanding why local governments are failing, identifying the challenges, and trying to look at ways of resolving those challenges. So it should be a process. But I think what is not good in this country is where local governments, where ministries are trying to take advantage, use the challenges as a justification for removing the powers that local government should have. I think the process, like there is now a deliberate process of re-centralizing services, all right? There are a lot of services that are being taken away from the local governments, and the local governments are becoming powerless. So I think Parliament should interest itself and begin to look at why local governments are not performing well. How do we help local government? And if it's about local revenue, how do we empower them so they have a much wider local revenue base? This should be the thinking. I wouldn't want to see a struggle between local government entities and the central government, because local governments are agents of the central government, and there should be no struggle. I think the overall intention of local government is to make sure services are given to the citizens, and the fact that services have to be taken much closer to the citizen should be the reason why the central government should actually give a lot more power and also a lot more resources to local governments to perform well.
In a brief statement as we wind up, Honorable Martin, during the period you were at the helm of that local government in Gulu district, you performed well. You must be in the know of what exactly is the biggest challenge with service delivery at local government level. Besides revenue, what is that biggest challenge probably that hinders service delivery at local government level?
Well, just as I explained, number one, I think we need to know that for services to be delivered effectively, there should be people who do that. And that takes us to the question of staffing. We need to have the staffing level, the human resource structure that is required to have those services done effectively. And I can tell you, we have a lot more problem with districts that were created recently. Actually, a few days ago, there was a report published. This is the performance assessment report, which is annually conducted by the Ministry of Local Government. And when you look at this performance assessment report, you'll realize that majority of the worst performing districts are districts that were created not so long ago. And so the question is, why are newly created districts performing poorly? Because they don't have the manpower to execute those, to provide those services. Sometimes, when you go to a district, majority of the people are in acting position, all right? So the question is, why should we not help? Why should we not provide the resources they need so they can recruit the people they need to work and provide those services? The other thing that I also talked about is the question of capacity gap. How do we help empower, build the capacity of local governments so they are able to do what it takes to effectively provide services? The other thing is legislation. For example, right now, there is even a much bigger problem with the newly created cities. To this day, actually, the cities are almost a year down the road. These cities were created in 2020, July, 1st of July. To this day, the cities do not have regulatory framework. They do not have guidelines, a framework that would guide the operation of the cities. They are struggling. There is no human resource structure. They are not able to perform. Some of the cities to this day have not accessed even the funding they have been given, and the cities have also not been given startup funds. So there are a number of things that have to be done. So for me, in terms of creating effectiveness, in terms of allowing local governments to perform, to execute their mandates, I think we need to have a much deeper look at decentralization as a whole, but also look at the level at which decentralization has moved, the level of re-centralization. And I think that should be an area of interest. So soon, we will be having a discussion with the Ministry of Local Government. Actually, part of what we want to do as members of parliament, especially from the cities, from the newly created cities, is to get together and have a discussion with the Ministry of Local Government. First, to demand that the ministry fast-tracked the process of coming up with a regulatory framework, the guidelines. Secondly, the Ministry of Local Government has to provide resources for the new cities, but also, I think, based on the recently published report, the assessment report, government should begin to ask this question: why should districts be performing poorly? And how do we use that, the assessment report, to begin to understand how we can improve and make local governments work well, function well, and deliver services to the citizens?
Thank you so much, Honorable Martin Ojala Mapinduzi. Thank you so much for your time. And again, I hope and guess that that is the reason why the people of Gulu City sent you to that August House. And that's what we wait to see, how you will push this matter to the end. And we see the wonders you did in Gulu City being probably enjoyed by
Well, thank you very much, my brother. We will try our best, and by the grace of God, we will be able to make a breakthrough and make sure things are done in the correct way. And also, we need to pay a lot of attention to what the citizens of this country need. And we can do much better when we empower local government entities to function well. I think that should be the direction. So thank you very much.
All right, our viewers, he is the Honorable Martin Ojala Mapinduzi, the legislator representing Gulu West, and he is also the Shadow Minister for Local Government in the 11th Parliament. We've been talking about revenues. Okay, well. We will again see you next week. Hope this will end well and the funds that will be collected will be put to good use for the betterment of our country. My name is Simapolo. I wish you a splendid weekend. Good evening.